There is a word in Psalm 23 that changes everything, but most English translations miss it completely. For 30 years, I taught biblical Hebrew at seminary, and even I missed it until I was sitting beside my dying husband, translating this psalm word by word, desperate for comfort. What I discovered that night broke me open and put me back together in ways I never expected. Today I want to take you beneath the surface of the most beloved psalm in all of Scripture. Not to analyze it academically, though we will look at some Hebrew, but to discover what David actually wrote, what he actually meant, and why it matters so profoundly for your life right now. If you have ever felt like God is distant, like you are walking through your own dark valley, like the words of Scripture are familiar, but somehow do not reach the aching places in your heart, stay with me. Because Psalm 23 has secrets that most people read right past, and once you see them, you will never read this psalm the same way again. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. These words are so familiar that we almost do not hear them anymore. They are printed on greeting cards, stitched on pillows, recited at funerals. We have heard them so many times that they have become spiritual wallpaper, pleasant but unnoticed. But David did not write spiritual wallpaper. He wrote from the depths of his soul. Let me take you back to when David likely wrote this psalm. Scholars debate the exact timing, but many believe it came from David's wilderness years, when he was running for his life from King Saul. Imagine David hiding in caves, sleeping on rocks, never knowing when the next attack would come. He had been anointed as the future king, yet here he was, living like a hunted animal. Everything God had promised seemed like a cruel joke, and it was from that place of confusion and danger that David wrote these words, "The Lord is my shepherd." Now here is the first thing most people miss. When David said, "The Lord is my shepherd," he was not just using a pretty metaphor. He was making a radical theological statement. David knew sheep. He had been a shepherd himself. He knew that sheep are completely dependent creatures. They cannot find water on their own. They cannot defend themselves from predators. Left to their own devices, sheep will wander off cliffs, eat poisonous plants, and get hopelessly lost. Sheep need a shepherd, or they die. By calling God his shepherd, David was admitting something that went against every instinct of a warrior and future king. He was admitting total dependence. He was saying, "I cannot navigate this life on my own. I cannot protect myself. I cannot find what I need. I need someone to lead me." In the original Hebrew, the word for shepherd is ro. It comes from a root that means to tend, to pasture, to feed. A roe does not just watch sheep from a distance. A roe is intimately involved in every aspect of the sheep's life, feeding them, leading them to water, pulling thorns from their wool, carrying the weak ones, fighting off wolves, sleeping at the entrance of the fold so nothing can get in without going through him first. This is what David was saying about God. Not that God is generally overseeing the universe, but that God is personally, intimately, daily caring for him. For David, the shepherd is not a distant manager. The shepherd is present. The shepherd is involved. The shepherd knows each sheep by name. And here is something beautiful that the Hebrew reveals. When David wrote, "The Lord is my shepherd," he used the covenant name of God. Yahweh. The name God revealed to Moses at the burning bush. The name so sacred that Jewish people would not even pronounce it. This was not just any shepherd. This was the eternal, covenant-keeping, faithful God who had made promises and would keep them. I shall not want. In Hebrew, this is lo exar. It can be translated, I lack nothing, or I am not in want, or I have no lack. But what does that mean? David was hiding in caves. He was running for his life. He certainly lacked comfort, safety, certainty about the future. So, what is he saying? Here is what I have come to understand, and it took my own journey through loss to see it. When David says, "I shall not want," he is not saying that life is comfortable or that he has everything he desires. He is saying that with this shepherd, nothing essential is missing. With Yahweh as his shepherd, even in the wilderness, even in danger, even in confusion, the core of what he needs is present. My husband Harold was dying of cancer. He had been my partner for 32 years. We had built a life together, raised children together, grown old together. And now he was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I felt desperate for some word from God that would make sense of the senselessness. One night, sitting beside his bed in the hospice room, I opened my Hebrew Bible and started translating Psalm 23 word by word. I needed to hear it fresh. I needed to get past the familiarity and hear what David was actually saying. When I got to Lo Exar, I shall not want, I stopped. Harold was dying. I certainly wanted many things. I wanted him to live. I wanted more time. I wanted the pain to stop. I wanted to understand why. Was David lying? Was this psalm only true for people whose lives were going well? And then I understood something that changed everything. David was not saying that all his wants were satisfied. He was saying that with this shepherd, even unsatisfied wants did not create ultimate lack, because the shepherd himself was present. And his presence filled a space that circumstances never could. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Here is another detail most people miss. Sheep do not lie down easily. They are nervous animals, always watching for danger. A sheep will only lie down when it feels completely safe, when it is well fed, when it is not bothered by flies or other sheep, when there is no threat in sight. Getting sheep to lie down requires the shepherd to create conditions of peace. When David says he makes me lie down, he is saying that God creates conditions where his anxious soul can rest. Not because circumstances are perfect, but because the shepherd is trustworthy. This is not passive rest. This is rest created by active care. The phrase green pastures in Hebrew is neot deshe. Neot means pastures or habitations, places of rest. Deshe means fresh grass, new growth. This is not dried-up leftovers. This is lush, fresh provision. The shepherd does not just barely sustain. The shepherd provides abundantly. He leads me beside still waters. In Hebrew, this is me menucho, which literally means waters of rest or waters of quietness. Here is something fascinating. Sheep are afraid of running water. The sound frightens them, and their wool, if it gets waterlogged, can drag them under. A good shepherd knows this. A good shepherd does not drive sheep to rushing rivers and say, "Figure it out." A good shepherd finds still pools, calm places where the sheep can drink without fear. God knows what frightens us. He knows our anxieties, our phobias, our past traumas that make certain situations terrifying. And He leads us, not to what looks impressive or dramatic, but to what we actually need. He meets us where we are, not where we should be. He restores my soul. This is Yashiv Nafshi in Hebrew, and this phrase deserves deep attention. The word nafshi, my soul, comes from nephesh, which in Hebrew means so much more than we usually think of as soul. Nephesh is your entire being, your life force, your deepest self. It includes your emotions, your mind, your body, your whole existence. David is not just talking about some ethereal spiritual part. He is talking about everything he is. And Yashiv means to turn back, to return, to restore. It is the same root as the word teshuvah, which means repentance, but more literally means returning. When David says God restores his soul, he is saying God brings him back. Back from what? From wandering. from exhaustion, from the depleted, burnt out, running on empty state that comes from facing too much for too long. This is what I experienced after Harold died. I was depleted in every way. Physically exhausted from months of caregiving, emotionally wrung out from grief, spiritually dry because I had poured out everything and had nothing left. I felt like my nephesh had been scattered to the winds, but slowly, gently, God restored me. Not all at once, not quickly, but He brought me back. He turned me back toward life. He returned what had been lost, not Harold, but myself. My capacity to feel joy, my ability to see beauty, my sense of purpose, all restored, piece by piece. He guides me in paths of righteousness, for His name is sake. The Hebrew word for guide here is nachani, which means to lead, to guide, to conduct along. It implies ongoing direction, not just a single moment of showing the way. God is not like a map you consult once. He is like a guide who walks with you, continually showing the next step. Paths of righteousness in Hebrew is magalai tzedek. Magalai means tracks or wagon tracks, the kind of grooves worn into dirt roads by repeated use. These are not random directions. These are established ways, proven paths, routes that others have traveled safely before. When God guides us in paths of righteousness, He is not experimenting with our lives. He is leading us on tested ground. And then David adds, for His name is sake. This is crucial. God's guidance is not primarily about us. It is about His reputation, His character, His commitment to being who He says He is. This is actually incredibly comforting. If God's guidance depended on my worthiness, I would be lost. But because it depends on His name, on His faithfulness to His own character, I can trust it even when I feel undeserving. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Here is where we come to what I discovered that night beside Harold, his bed. The word that changed everything for me. The Hebrew phrase is Gate Salmavet. For centuries, this has been translated as the valley of the shadow of death. And that translation is not wrong, but it misses something profound. Salmavet is actually a compound word. Zel means shadow. Mavet means death. But what does a shadow require? A shadow requires light. You cannot have a shadow in complete darkness. A shadow exists only when light is present, even if blocked. When David wrote about the valley of the shadow of death, he was not describing a place of total darkness. He was describing a place where light was partially blocked, where darkness was present but not complete, where death cast its shadow but did not have final dominion. This understanding hit me with physical force that night. Harold was dying. We were in the valley. But it was not a valley of death. It was a valley of the shadow of death. And shadows mean light is still present. Even there, in that hospice room with the machines beeping and Harold is breathing growing shallow, light was present. God was present. We were not in absolute darkness. We were in shadow. And shadows are temporary. Shadows are cast by something standing in the way of light. But the light is still there. The light always wins. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Notice what David says. He does not say, I will fear no evil, because evil is not real. He does not say, I will fear no evil, because the valley is not dangerous. He says, I will fear no evil, because you are with me. The presence of the shepherd is what removes the fear, not the absence of danger. This is so important. Many Christians think that faith means never facing difficulty, that if they trust God enough, they will be spared the valley. But David knew better. David knew that valleys are part of the journey. The question is not whether we will face darkness, but who will be with us when we do. And here is another Hebrew insight. When David says, "You are with me," he switches from talking about God in the third person, "He leads me," to addressing God in the second person, "You are with me." This is not accidental. As David walks into the deepest darkness, his relationship with God becomes more intimate, more direct. In the easy pastures, he can talk about God. In the shadow of death, he talks to God. The valley brings him closer. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The rod and staff where shepherd is tools. The rod was a club used to fight off predators. The staff was a long crook used to guide sheep, to pull them back from danger, to lift them out of holes. One was for protection. One was for direction. When David says they comfort me, he uses the Hebrew word yenakamuni, from the same root as the name Nehemiah, which means the Lord comforts. This word does not just mean to make feel better. It means to sigh deeply with someone, to be moved with compassion, to be truly present in their suffering. The shepherd's tools bring comfort because they represent his active involvement. He fights for us. He guides us. He does not stand at a distance giving advice. He is in the battle with us. He is reaching down into our pit to pull us up. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Now the metaphor shifts. We are no longer with sheep and shepherds. We are at a banquet. But this is not just any banquet. This is a table set in the presence of enemies. In the ancient Near East, to share a table with someone was a profound act of relationship. Enemies did not eat together. Sharing food meant sharing life. So when David says God prepares a table for him in the presence of his enemies, he is making an audacious statement. Even while surrounded by those who want to harm him, he can feast. Even while danger lurks, he can be nourished. Because the host of the table is greater than any enemy present. This spoke to me during the years after Harold died. I had enemies, not people who wanted to harm me, but enemies like grief, like loneliness, like despair. They were present at every meal. They sat across from me at the empty table where Harold used to sit. But God spread a table even there. He nourished me even in their presence. He did not remove the enemies. He fed me anyway. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Anointing with oil was an act of honor in the ancient world. When you welcomed a guest into your home, you would anoint their head with fragrant oil. It was a sign of acceptance, of welcome, of being chosen. David is saying that God does not just tolerate him. God does not just put up with him. God honors him. God welcomes him as a cherished guest. This is not a reluctant host doing the bare minimum. This is a lavish host pouring out welcome. And my cup overflows. In Hebrew, this is kosi revaya. Revaya comes from a root meaning abundance, saturation, overflow. The cup is not just full, it is more than full. It cannot contain all that God is pouring into it. This is the nature of God is provision. Not just enough, but more than enough. Not just what we need, but overflow. Not just survival, but abundance. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Here is something beautiful about the Hebrew. The word for follow is yerdafuni, which actually means to pursue, to chase, to run after. It is the same word used for pursuing enemies in battle. David is saying that goodness and mercy are chasing him down. They are hunting him, not to harm him, but to bless him. We often think we have to chase after good things. We have to pursue blessing, pursue God's favor, pursue the life we want. But David flips this. He says, goodness and mercy are pursuing him. All the days of his life, these two qualities will be running after him, seeking to catch up with him, refusing to let him go. And what are they? Tov and chesed. Tov means goodness, what is pleasant and beneficial. Chesed is one of the most important words in the Hebrew Bible. It is often translated as mercy or loving kindness, but it means so much more. Chesed is covenant love, faithful love, love that keeps its promises, love that does not give up. This is what chases you. If you belong to the shepherd, you are being pursued by goodness and covenant love. Not just today, but all the days of your life. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This is the conclusion. After the valleys, after the shadows, after the enemies, and the overflowing cups, where do we end up? In the house of the Lord. Forever. The Hebrew word for dwell is veshavti, which actually has a double meaning. It can mean to dwell or to return. Some translations say, I will return to the house of the Lord. Both meanings are true. We will dwell there, and we will return there, again and again, until finally we return and never leave. Forever is leorech yamim, which literally means for length of days. It does not just mean eternity in some abstract sense. It means day after day after day. More days than can be counted, days without end. When Harold took his final breath that night, I held his hand and whispered these words, "You will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." And I believed it. Not because I had figured out all the mysteries of eternity, but because I had discovered the character of the shepherd. A shepherd this good, this faithful, this present in the valley, would not abandon his sheep at the final gate. He would bring them home. There is one more Hebrew insight I want to share with you before we close, something that has stayed with me ever since that night with Harold. Throughout this psalm, David uses what scholars call the divine name, YHWH, Yahweh. But there is something else happening beneath the surface that most readers never notice. David structures this psalm in a very deliberate way. The valley of the shadow of death stands at the exact center of the poem. Everything before it leads toward it. Everything after it flows from it. This is not accidental. In Hebrew poetry, the center of a chiastic structure is where the main point lives. David is telling us something profound. The valley is not a detour from the journey. The valley is the heart of the journey. It is in the darkest place that the shepherd's presence becomes most real, most intimate, most transformative. I think about this often. We spend so much of our lives trying to avoid the valley. We pray to be delivered from difficulty. We ask God to remove our problems. And there is nothing wrong with those prayers. But David's psalm suggests something counterintuitive. The valley is where we discover what we could never learn on the easy pastures. When Harold was first diagnosed, I prayed desperately for healing. I prayed with all the faith I could muster. I claimed every promise I knew. And when he did not get better, I wondered if my faith was too small, if I had done something wrong, if God was punishing me for some sin I could not identify. But sitting beside his bed that final night, translating Psalm 23, I realized something that set me free. The psalm does not promise that we will avoid the valley. It promises that we will not be alone in it. The shepherd does not lead around the shadow. He leads through it. And somehow, impossibly, that is enough. Harold and I met at a seminary library in 1968. He was studying church history. I was working on my Hebrew dissertation. We were both too young and too idealistic to know how hard life would be. We got married 6 months later in a tiny chapel with 17 guests and more hope than sense. We had 52 years together. We raised 3 children. We buried his parents and then mine. We moved 7 times for various teaching positions. We weathered disagreements and disappointments and the slow discovery that marriage is much harder than romance. We learned, slowly and painfully, what covenant actually means. And then the diagnosis came. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. The doctor said months, maybe weeks. Harold, always the historian, said, "Well, everyone's story ends eventually. I suppose it is my turn." I was furious. Not at God exactly, but at everything. At the unfairness of it. At the decades of prayers that now seemed unanswered. At the Psalms themselves, which I had taught for 30 years but which now seemed inadequate for the weight of this grief. That is why I opened my Hebrew Bible that night. Not out of faith, but out of desperation. I needed to see if there was anything real beneath the familiar words. I needed to know if David had actually experienced what he wrote, or if these were just pretty phrases that fell apart when life got hard. What I found was not pretty phrases. What I found was raw truth hammered out in the wilderness by a man who knew exactly how dark the valley could be. David did not write Psalm 23 from a palace. He wrote it while hiding in caves, while his enemies pursued him, while everyone he loved was in danger. He wrote it from the same kind of darkness I was sitting in, and that changed everything for me. Because if the psalm was true for David in the wilderness, maybe it could be true for me in that hospice room. Maybe the shepherd who was with David in the caves was with me beside Harold's bed. Maybe the shadow I was walking through proved that light was still present somewhere. Let me share something else about the Hebrew that I discovered later, after Harold had passed, as I kept studying this psalm, trying to understand what I had experienced. The word nachem, from which we get yenachamuni, they comfort me, appears multiple times throughout the Hebrew Bible. But its most powerful usage comes in Genesis, when the text says that God regretted, nachem, making humanity before the flood. The word carries the sense of being deeply moved, of sighing from the depths of one's being, of being so affected by something that you cannot remain unchanged. When David says the shepherd's rod and staff comfort him, he is not describing mild encouragement. He is describing divine grief entering into human grief. He is saying that the shepherd is so moved by our suffering that he sighs with us, that he is affected by what affects us, that our pain registers in his heart. This is what I felt in that hospice room. Not answers, not explanations, not even relief from the grief, but presence. A presence that was somehow grieving with me, sighing with me, refusing to let me suffer alone. The shepherd was not standing apart with good advice. He was in the valley with me, his heart breaking alongside mine. I have taught Hebrew for 3 decades. I have analyzed verb forms and parsed grammatical structures. I have written papers and given lectures and trained hundreds of students. But I did not understand this psalm until I needed it. Until the words were not academic but desperate. Until the Hebrew was not interesting but life or death. That is the thing about the Psalms. They were not written for classrooms. They were written for valleys. They were written for the 3 in the morning moments when sleep will not come and fear will not leave. They were written for people like you and me who need more than information. We need truth that can bear the weight of real grief. So what does all this mean for you today? Perhaps you are walking through your own valley right now. Perhaps the shadow of death is not just a metaphor, but a reality you are facing. Perhaps you have read Psalm 23 100 times, but it has never touched the places that hurt. Perhaps you are like I was, drowning in familiar words that do not seem to reach the depth of your pain. Let me leave you with what I learned in that hospice room, translating these words while my husband was dying. The valley is not the end. It is a passage. You walk through it. You do not live in it forever. Even when it feels like you will never emerge, the shepherd knows the way through. The shadow proves the light. Wherever there is shadow, there is light nearby. Even in your darkest moment, the light has not been extinguished. It has only been temporarily blocked, and shadows do not last forever. The shepherd's presence is better than the absence of problems. David did not find his peace in circumstances improving. He found it in the shepherd being with him. The same is true for you. You may not get the outcome you are praying for, but you can have the presence that makes any outcome bearable. You are being pursued by goodness and faithful love. You do not have to chase after God is blessing. It is chasing after you. Right now, today, goodness and chesed are running toward you. Let them catch you. And finally, the house of the Lord is your destination. Whatever happens in the valley, whatever shadows you pass through, you are headed home. The shepherd will bring you there. He has never lost a sheep yet. I want to share something practical with you now. Something I have done every day since Harold died, and something that has kept this psalm alive in my heart when grief threatened to swallow me whole. Every morning, before I get out of bed, before I check my phone or think about my schedule, I say these words out loud. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. That is it. Just those 2 lines. Sometimes I say them through tears. Sometimes I say them with joy. Sometimes I say them mechanically because I do not feel anything at all. But I say them. And here is what I have discovered. The psalm works on me even when I am not working on the psalm. Something happens when you speak these ancient words into the morning air. Something shifts. Not dramatically, not magically, but really. You begin the day not with your problems, but with your shepherd. You establish, before the world rushes in, who is leading and who is following. I also keep a simple practice that Harold and I started together years before he got sick. Every evening, we would ask each other the same question. Where did you see the shepherd today? It sounds simple, almost childish, but it trained us to look for God's activity in ordinary moments. A kind word from a stranger. A problem that resolved itself. A moment of unexpected peace. We became shepherd spotters, always watching for evidence of his care. After Harold died, I continued the practice alone. I sit in the chair where he used to sit, and I ask myself the question, where did I see the shepherd today? And almost always, even on the hardest days, there is something. Not always dramatic. Sometimes just the sunlight through the window at the right moment. Sometimes the memory of Harold that brings comfort instead of pain. Small signs that the shepherd is still leading, still providing, still present. I want to suggest you try something this week. Take Psalm 23 and read it slowly each morning. But do not just read it. Pray it. Turn each line into a conversation with God. The Lord is my shepherd. Lord, I receive you as my shepherd today. I admit that I cannot lead myself. I need you. I shall not want. Lord, with you, I have everything essential. Help me believe that today, even when my circumstances tell me otherwise. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Lord, create conditions of peace in my anxious soul. Help me rest in your care. He leads me beside still waters. Lord, lead me to what I actually need, not what I think I need. Meet me where I am. He restores my soul. Lord, bring me back. From exhaustion, from depletion, from wherever I have wandered. Return my capacity for life. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Lord, guide me today, not because I deserve it, but because you are faithful to your own character. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Lord, I may face shadows today, but shadows prove light. Help me remember that you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Lord, fight for me and guide me. Be actively involved in my struggles. Do not stand at a distance. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Lord, nourish me even when troubles surround me. Feed me despite my circumstances. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Lord, I receive your honor, your welcome, your abundance. Not because I earned it, but because you are generous. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Lord, I believe that your goodness and chesed are chasing me. Help me, let them catch me, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Lord, remind me where I am headed. Whatever happens today, I am going home. This is how the psalm becomes more than words. This is how it becomes your daily conversation with the shepherd who is already present, already leading, already restoring. One more thing before we close. Harold's favorite part of this psalm was the cup that overflows. He used to say, "Eleanor, God is never just enough. He is always more than enough." We just forget to look up from our empty cups and notice, in the last week of his life, Harold could barely speak. But one afternoon, he opened his eyes, looked at me, and whispered, "The cup is overflowing." I still do not know if he was talking about our life together, or God's faithfulness, or what he was seeing beyond the veil. But I have held those words close ever since. The cup is overflowing. Even in loss, even in the valley, even when everything we love is slipping away. The cup overflows because the host is generous, because his provision exceeds our capacity to receive, because there is always more grace than we can hold. This week, I want you to read Psalm 23 again. But read it slowly. Read it personally. Replace my with your own name. The Lord is my shepherd. Sarah shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He guides me in paths of righteousness. And when you come to the valley of the shadow of death, remember, shadows require light. The light is still there. The shepherd is still with you, and you will dwell in his house forever. If this message has brought comfort to your heart, I would love for you to join me again. Subscribe to this channel, and let us explore the Psalms together. There are treasures waiting in these ancient words, treasures that can bring light to your darkest valleys. Take a moment now. Just sit with what David wrote 3,000 years ago. Do not analyze it. Do not study it. Just let it wash over you. Sometimes the Psalms do not need explanation. They need space to sink from your head to your heart. May the shepherd who leads beside still waters give you rest tonight. May his rod and staff bring you comfort. And may you know, deep in your bones, that goodness and faithful love are pursuing you all the days of your life. Until we meet again, this is Eleanor. Go in peace. The shepherd is with you.